Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. As Katie mentioned, my name is Brianna York. I am a senior software engineering recruiter at Optimi Professional Services. Give me one second, my screen. There we go. I have been working with Optimi for roughly about 3.5 years now. During my entire time here, I have been dedicated solely to software engineering recruitment. So with that being said, I do, a lot of time kind of learning what I can with the resources that I am given. So I do a lot of LinkedIn learning courses. I've gotten some C#. I'm actually currently working on my Python right now. Have done the JavaScript, HTML, CSS, just LinkedIn learning courses. It makes it easier for me to have, good conversations with you guys, be able to ask you, the right kind of questions, and have a conversation with you guys about, what you do day in and day out. I recently got my AWS Cloud Technical Essentials, AWS or cloud as a whole. I'm sure you guys know is something that is up and coming, or also very relevant in today's technology. So that is something that I did earlier this year, and then I actually just finished my Salesforce Basic certification about 3 or 4 weeks ago too. So I love to learn. I am passionate about staying up to date and being able to, be as good at my job as I can. But really excited to be here. I know Katie mentioned the market is not the best. So I am here to help any way that I can to be able to, help you guys find new opportunities. But just kind of want to go over the plan for today. This is a resume building workshop, but I always like to emphasize how important LinkedIn is in the job search process. So going to do just a quick overview of LinkedIn, how we as recruiters or, hiring managers use them, use that as a resource to us. And then we will dive a little bit more in depth of your resume too. At the end, I will have my contact information, phone number, email address. If you guys, want to send me over your resume, I will do my best to look at all of them in a timely manner and send you back any tips or tricks or changes that I would recommend for you. But without further ado, we can go ahead and get started. So starting off with LinkedIn, as I mentioned, this is something that is super important, and it is a platform that we use very extensively in the hiring process. Saw a statistic the other day, 93% of companies use LinkedIn as their number one form of finding candidates for their hiring needs. So this is a lot. This is the platform, more than any other platform. There's Dice, there's Indeed, Monster, there's a lot of other platforms available, but based on the research, LinkedIn is going to be the number one way of hiring and finding candidates for hiring needs. So want to quickly run through with you guys first how LinkedIn works from a recruiter's perspective. LinkedIn has a separate platform for recruitment. So it's not the same necessarily LinkedIn that you're seeing whenever you're going to your homepage and scrolling through, your feed of all of your connections and what they have to say. There is a separate platform that is used specifically for recruitment. It's called LinkedIn Recruiter. So, and just going to kind of go through briefly some terms that you may hear me say throughout this presentation, so you have an idea of, if I say it, what it means. So, open to work preferences are going to be something that is super important, and I would highly recommend, if you are open to work, make sure that your status is updated. There is a way to only share your open to work status with recruiters and not give you that bright green banner that your employer could see or a colleague could see. All you have to do is go into your settings, and you are able to turn that off so you can quietly enter the market if it's something that you are looking to do. And then Boolean searches is something else. So Boolean searches, the best way that I can explain it is basically a Google type string that we are able to put together full of and, ors, or not statements that basically produce, relevant profiles to whichever job description we are searching for. And then we're also able to use advanced searches. So, in the case that we're working a role that is going to be a hybrid position in New York City, we're able to specifically put, the location of New York City. You're also able to edit it to do open to, relocate to New York City. So if you are currently, local to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I am, but you're open to relocation, that is also something that we are able to search for. I would like to say with the open to work preferences, be very specific. You have the option of saying if you're open to contract to hire, direct hire, full time, internships. So make sure all of those are up to date. It'll be able to, help with recruiters reaching out to you for the positions that you are open to. I'm sure if you probably had some people reaching out to you on LinkedIn that are saying, hey, I have this role, it's 5 days, on site, but you're only open to remote positions. Make sure that you're up to date, your status is up to date, and that will help with that too. And then kind of want to walk through what a 5-star profile is from our standpoint, and actually LinkedIn, what they consider a 5-star profile too. So another statistic is that only 51% of LinkedIn profiles are actually what LinkedIn considers a complete profile. That gives typically, if we were to start a search for a candidates with completed profiles will come up first in our searches before it goes to candidates that do not have complete profiles. So they have 7 specific things that are required within your profile to be able to be considered a fully completed profile. The industry that you are currently working in, or if you are still enrolled in college, you can put education at the top just because it's something that they require for you to do. And the location is also required. So if you put United States, that is not considered a up-to-date and correct location. So it needs to be where you currently live. You are able to do just the state, but LinkedIn does prefer, and it will generate on top if you put the city and the state that you live in. They do require you to have a current position listed. If you are currently unemployed and you want to put, open to work, that does count. And they also require you to have 2 past positions listed as well. Each of these have to have a description underneath them. So, if you are currently a software engineer, if you have your resume ready, copy and paste your job description into the current position that you have on LinkedIn, that will qualify for that. And then education is required as well. So if you do not have a completed degree, but you have done some coursework, you are able to put it in there. Does not have to be, a completed bachelor degree. You can put coursework towards, or if you are currently still enrolled in school, that is an option as well. But some type of education is required to be able to qualify for a completed profile. Another thing that they require is skills, which is something that I would say is the most important thing for anything. If you are open to work on the job market, is making sure that your skills are up to date. If you have updated your resume recently, but have not updated the skills section of your LinkedIn profile, make sure to do so. Recruiters are able to search specifically on skills. When I say skills, there's obviously going to be some skills that are listed that are more soft skills, but the technical skills is what is super important. So if you're working as a full stack developer, make sure that you're working, if you're working on React in the front end, make sure that's listed as a skill. If you're working on Node in the back end, make sure that's listed as a skill. That is going to be the way that recruiters use the platform with those keywords to be able to find candidates that have the experience that we're looking for. LinkedIn does require you to have a profile picture. It does not have to be of your face, but it has to be of something. So make sure you do have something uploaded there. And then the last requirement that they have is that you must have more than 50 connections on LinkedIn. So if you don't have that, utilize your network, any classmates, colleagues that you have, anybody from Women Who Code NYC that make sure that you are connecting with them. It'll give you more connections, but it'll also be able to generate more activity on your news feed page for anybody that's liking a post that's hiring for a software engineer or something of that nature as well. And then the last one that I would like to say, it's not something that LinkedIn requires, but it is something that is super important, and what I would consider an above and beyond factor for your LinkedIn profile is recommendations. So if you have, somebody that you worked with in a boot camp, or somebody that you, partnered with for your college capstone project, or somebody in your current role that you've worked super closely with, you can actually go to their profile and request that they write you a recommendation. it makes it a little bit easier for them to go on there, click yes, and then type something out super quickly. That is something that we are able to take, to those hiring managers and say, hey, we have somebody that's able to speak on their behalf. They loved working with them. They collaborated really well in the environment. Kind of gives you a competitive edge towards other candidates that may not have those things listed. So I always like to recommend that as well. And then moving forward, just an example from a LinkedIn perspective, with LinkedIn. On the left is a incomplete profile. On the right is a completed profile. So if yours looks like the left, definitely put in those descriptions, a skills section. If you don't want to put your full job description, being able to put, the environment that you're working in under there is going to be something that's super useful. Just because if I'm, recruiting for a full stack JavaScript developer position and you're currently a principal software engineer, but I don't know what the tech stack is, you could likely be a Java developer and I have no idea. So I'm reaching out to you. It will help recruiters that are calling you and, you're not a fit for the role that they're recruiting for. So just kind of make sure that from a LinkedIn perspective, the right is a better example of, what to put there. And then I did just see a question come in. So give me 1 second here.
I can help you with a question. So
Yeah,
it was how many
absolutely.
skills are recommended, and
Yeah.
it can easily to end up with an over abundance of libraries and frameworks.
Absolutely. So what I would say there is keeping them up to date is going to be super important. Right when you graduated, I'm sure, you put Java, C++, those, things that you learned in Computer Science 101 or that capstone project that you did. But once you gain that extra experience, working in a boot camp or going into your professional career and working with the tech stacks, you can, once you put a skill in, you are able to delete it. So if you have decided the pathway that you want to go down and you're really looking to, or you've really, honed in on your skills on one specific language and specific libraries, make sure that's up to date. I would not necessarily say that there's a number of amount of skills listed, just kind of depends on the environment that you're in and truly, how much you're working with. I would say roughly 15 to 20 is more than enough. It gives us a very good, understanding of the environments that you're worked in and the tools and, languages that you're using. But I would not necessarily say there's a specific number. LinkedIn doesn't give you a limit on how many that you are able to list in, but I would agree that whenever it is an abundance of libraries and frameworks or programming languages and your, LinkedIn profile looks more like the left than the right, it's harder for us to differentiate the languages that you are currently working with, what your tech stack looks like. So just keep those up to date more so than anything. Go bend delete. If you worked with Java on a project for 3 or 4 months and you put that in there because you were looking for something new and got out of it and you hate it, take it out because it's going to keep people from reaching out to you for those type of positions as well. And then I can go ahead, I think. Yeah, we can stop there if anybody else has any other questions from LinkedIn, and then we will move into resume after that.
And if you have questions, feel free just to drop them in the chat. We'll have some time for a Q&A at the end.
Yep.
So feel free to send them in the chat.
Perfect. Well, I will go ahead and start with the resume portion. This is going to be, the bulk of everything and, where we're honing in more specifically. Resume is something that is very important, obviously, whenever you are entering the job market, being able to decipher into words what you're doing on a day-to-day basis is very difficult. So I'm here to kind of help you guys, work through that. I think one specific thing that I want to mention that has changed over the years is that, even in school or, if you ask your parents whenever you're starting out in your career and you are trying to put together a resume, there is, they tell you that, 1 page, it only needs to be 1 page. That is not the case anymore. There's not people, you're not printing out resumes on paper, handing it to somebody, and they're having to read word for word everything that your resume says. I would say that For a senior software engineer, I probably wouldn't go over 4 to 5 pages, depending on how much, usable information that you're putting in there and how in depth you're going. But 2 pages, 3 pages is completely fine based on how much experience you have. If you have a 1-page resume and you are comfortable with that, that's totally fine. But the more information, the better. So make sure you're not keeping, information out of your resume just to make sure that it is not 1 page. And something else is making sure that I know there's a lot of different templates that you can use, and you can go on Canva and have one that, a graphic designer has created for you. And it has, a lot of different pictures and things like that. Those typically do not do the best whenever you're putting them into an ATS, applicant tracking system. Basically, whenever you're applying even on LinkedIn for those easy apply jobs, LinkedIn goes in, it scans your resume, looks for those keywords, and then it actually gives you a rating, like a percentage number. This person is a 64% fit for this job based on the resume listed. Whenever you're adding in several graphics, if you're, putting in the screenshots of the AWS certification logo or things like that, it kind of gets lost in translation within those systems. So I just like to say, keep them clear, concise, bolded headers, and then all the information within a readable format. Typically, I would like to suggest that you have a Word doc version and a PDF version. PDF versions do better on things like LinkedIn and the ATS systems, but if you're working specifically with a recruiter, send them the Word doc version. A lot of the times, those ATS systems or the VMS, the vendor management systems that recruiters use specifically, have to have a specific format whenever they put them in there, because the ATS system that's tracking everything and grading the resumes do get lost. So if you keep a PDF and a Word document version, it is super helpful for you to not have to go through. PDF to Word converters don't work all the time. I wish they worked better, but they don't. So it just saves everybody a lot of time in the end too. Let me see. I saw some questions come into. Should we apply via company website or LinkedIn or both? Typically, if it is a direct hire position, the talent acquisition specialist is going to be looking at the LinkedIn profile. They're the one that posted it. So I would suggest not doing a multi-application process there. A lot of times, if it's a contract to hire position, I would suggest going through LinkedIn instead of through the company directly. A lot of times these recruiters have direct hiring manager contact. We've had face-to-face interaction. We had the meeting going through the position, what the must-haves are for the role. And we have weekly resume reviews set up. So we go on, present your candidate profile, and then are able to get the interview scheduled without having to go through the full HR hiring process, which I'm sure if you have, interviewed for a software engineering position, it is them just reading off of um, a screen of ChatGPT generated questions to ask you about your experience and how well you understand an array or whatever the case may be. So LinkedIn is definitely, I would say, for contract and contract to hire positions, the way that I would go from that standpoint. And I hope that answers your question. If you have a part-time job, should you add it to your LinkedIn, even if it is not too related to your career? Um, I would say likely not. The things that you want to take into consideration from that standpoint is that if you're, applying for full-time positions and they see that you're working a part-time role, especially something that's not necessarily in the field that you are, looking to be in long term, those are going to create some red flags. So, if this person is working a part-time role, how much are they actually working at this job? Are they doing 10, 15 hours a week? Are they doing 20 to 30 hours a week? Are they going to be able to focus, 40 hours a week on this role? So I would say keep those out. If you, on the counterpart of that, if it is something that is related to software engineering, if you have a LLC set up on the side where you're doing small startup projects, or small projects for startup companies, or, you are working for a nonprofit to make sure that their page is maintained, things like that, I would say those I would put in, but I would specifically specify how much time a week you are putting in, hours wise to those positions. It shows that you are, super eager about software engineering. It's something that you like to do outside of your work time, and it makes you, more appealable as a candidate within that. Hope that answers your question. Next question: are there job searching websites that are the least helpful, that has the most scams? That is a great question. I specifically, as a recruiter, the two platforms that I use most heavily are going to be LinkedIn and Dice. Here and there we use Indeed, but it's a very expensive platform to use. So we tend to stray away from that unless we, absolutely have to. I would say that Indeed does get a bad reputation for that from some standpoints. It really depends on the skill set that you focus in most specifically. But I would say that having your resume on Dice is going to be super helpful. With that, you are going to get a lot of cold calls. So set that expectation beforehand. People are going to call you directly from your Dice profile because they can't send you a message. If you put your contact information on Dice, people will call you. Sorry, let's see. Is a Word or a PDF doc better for a resume? If you're applying through systems specifically like LinkedIn Easy Apply, or you're going through a company's Workday account, I would say put in a PDF document. If you're working with a recruiter specifically, let them have the Word document portion, because it's easier for us to be able to work with you to be able to make your resume look better. Or, if we know that the hiring manager has a specific thing that strays away from profiles. If you're, a full stack developer currently, and say your title is full stack engineer, but the position that we are working with you for is going to be a back end position, and we know the manager is going to decline you if you have the word React in there because they don't want you to be too front end focused. We will relay that to you. We're not going to change your resume without your approval. But it makes it easier for us to kind of work back and forth with you to find that right resume to be able to present your profile with. If you have a career gap due to taking care of a child, is it best to have a hybrid resume where your jobs and skills are listed chronologically, but not include your dates? I have a 4-year gap. I would say that putting in specifics. So a lot of, a red flag, if you don't address that career gap, there's going to be a question why, and they may automatically decline you for that. If you specifically put in, career gap due to staying home to take care of my kids, still tried to stay up to date on technologies, watched a lot of YouTube videos, took a LinkedIn course to stay, up to date on all the relevant technologies, and worked on a GitHub repository on the side just to keep my skills sharp. Put that in there. The hiring manager's gonna be like, oh, perfect. That definitely makes sense while they were out for 4 years, but they did what they could to stay up to date. That's going to be super helpful. I always like to recommend putting specifically into your role what those, career gaps were for, because it's better to put them in there than somebody completely just reject your resume, doesn't call you, and doesn't ask you why the career gap was there, because a lot of time they are reasonable, and hiring managers do understand that. How much time do recruiters spend time looking at a resume? I would say that depends on the recruiter. You're never going to get the same experience, unfortunately, with any recruiter. It depends on, how experienced they are, how well they understand the job that they are hiring for, how well they understand what they're recruiting for as well. I personally do look through a full resume before giving you a call. I do still like to have more of an open-ended conversation, because I'd rather you, kind of go off on a rant and tell me about the role that you're currently in, instead of me asking you questions about the 4 to 5 bullet points that you have. But I would say that definitely just depends on the recruiter that you're working with. On average, one specific resume maybe depends on how long it is. Maybe 2 to 3 minutes. A lot of times whenever you go through like a LinkedIn, so that's where I get the majority of the resumes that I see firsthand. It goes ahead and highlights all of the specific keywords and tells me how close to a fit you are because of your resume and how many times your your resume has mentioned words that are also in the job description. So it'll give you a grade, like I mentioned. A lot of times, if nothing is highlighted where I don't see any technologies, I will look at a little bit more in depth. I'll go a little bit more in depth in your profile to kind of have an idea. But 2 to 3 minutes, I would say on average, probably for a 2-page resume, let's say. I would say yes, there definitely are scammers everywhere. Unfortunately, I will get to us like one specific example later where there are going to be scammers. Unfortunately, being able to, I like to say always following up with recruiters or having a recruiter follow up to you. So if they give you a call specifically about an opportunity, don't give them any of the information that they need on the phone. If they ask you for, a date of birth or the last four of your social. Unfortunately, there are clients that do require those things to be able to put you in their tracking system. That is the VMS system, the vendor management system that they use. That's where they call for interviews after they review your resume. The reason that they are asking for these things is because there's not going to be duplicate applicants. So if you worked with me, Brianna, threw up to me for a role, but you also worked with somebody from tech systems, that's working the same exact position, they want to make sure they're not calling an interview twice for the same candidate. But with that being said, I never ask for that on a first call. I will send them a follow-up email afterwards, thanking you for your time. Here's the full job description, the company, the logistics that we've discussed on the call, the full job description. My email is Optime, the company that I work for. So make sure that you are, keeping an eye out for things like that. Unfortunately, there are scammers everywhere. I had someone literally call my phone earlier today to tell me that my credit card had been hacked with a company that I don't even have a credit card with. So just be, weary of those types of things. Unfortunately, it's not something that you can fully prevent. That's just this day and age of technology. But be weary and just be cautious as much as you can. Let me see, next question. My take on Glassdoor. Oh, good question. Glassdoor for reviewing company websites or using it to, have other people's generalized idea of what it's like to work with the company. I like to say most people don't leave a review unless it's a bad one. If you go to a restaurant and you have phenomenal service, you're going to be a lot less likely to go on the Glassdoor and write a review that Sarah, your server was phenomenal. But if you had a really bad experience with Sarah, it's more likely that you're going to go on there and do that. So I like to say take it with a grain of salt. That's with the interview processes, being able to touch base with the people that are interviewing you. I love a panel style interview. I know a lot of people don't, because you're able to ask questions, ask them about their experience, hey, I know you've only been here for 7 months, or hey, I know you've been here for 8 years. What's it like to come in the environment? What's the onboarding process like? What's the culture like? In an interview, you're always interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. So ask those questions. Keep it a two-way street. Just, I would say, if you are looking at Glassdoor, always take those with a grain of salt, because there are a lot of people do, like I said, there's going to be more negative than positive on sites like that. Let's see. Any immediate red flags for recruiters that should be avoided on resumes? That's a good question too. I would say, let me see. Sorry, this chat keeps going up every time someone puts in a new question. A lot of times, if you do not have contact information listed, that is a red flag for me. You believe it or not, I do get resumes all the time for people that are applying to my jobs and don't give me a way to contact them. That is a red flag. Not having the location that you are currently in listed is also a red flag. We don't know where you're local to. A lot of times you will, a candidate could say that they're open to relocation. They end up not being open to relocation. We have to rescind an offer, things like that. And I would say other than that, not necessarily red flags, just the pictures of certifications or things like that. You don't need those on your logo, and it makes it a lot more difficult for us to be able to review your resumes. But something that I love to see is the more information, the better. And I'll go a few slides down of what I mean by that too. Let's see. Sorry, I'm going to keep going because I can't. The chat looks like we're getting a lot of questions, so I'm going to give you guys time to ask your questions, and I'll come back to it again. So starting with a resume. What to include on your resume. We will dive in specifically for each of these topics, but there are basically 6 things that need to be included in your resume that I always recommend, that makes it a lot easier for recruiters and hiring managers to, have a good understanding of who you are, as much as you can put on paper, right? So starting out with contact information, I know I just mentioned that as something that is important, but it really needs to be in your resume, right? This is just my contact information because you'll see it again at the end of the slide. So your name is obviously going to be super important. If you do not go by your legal name, I would say putting both on there is going to be important. Or if you want to keep it with the name that you go by, make sure that whenever you touch base with someone that is hiring for a position, let them know your legal name. That is going to be a requirement for most positions, especially whenever it gets to an offer stage. If you get an offer and the name is not your legal name, it may pick up the process a little bit. Phone number, email address, location, and LinkedIn profile is super, super, super important. Like I mentioned earlier, Dice. If you have your profile up on Dice, your resume's up on Dice, you are going to get a lot of cold calls. However, if you put your LinkedIn profile on your Dice resume, they will go to LinkedIn first to see if you're a fit for the position, or they'll go to LinkedIn and message you. So it will help cut down cold calls. I know cold calls are frustrating. I do cold calls, and I know people hate them. I promise I don't love them any more than you love receiving them, but it is a very good tool for us to be able to use to be able to find candidates. So put your LinkedIn profile on there. It'll cut down on the amount of cold calls that you are receiving. Makes the process a little bit easier if we can all use LinkedIn too. So just like to recommend that. The second thing that I always like to see education up at the top of the resume. If you have a degree, if you do not have a degree, I would slide it down to the bottom. But a lot of the, if you are applying specifically for a position where the first bullet point for requirements for this role is must have a bachelor's degree of some sort, that is the first thing that I'm going to have to look at your resume if the hiring manager genuinely does have to hire somebody with a degree. So put that at the top. This is a screenshot of a candidate that I placed about a month ago. This is what their profile looked like. So they had a bachelor's degree in computer science. I would say they're a more junior to early mid-level developer. They had about 2.5 years of experience, of professional experience. So I like to say within the 1 to 3.5 years of experience, if you have some things that highlight you as a candidate through your profession or your educational career, list those. This candidate had roughly 2.5 years of experience. He on paper had a great resume, but he also had a great personality. This candidate with 2.5 years of experience ended up beating out somebody that had 15 years of professional software engineering experience, because they saw, oh, he only has 2.5 years of professional experience, but look at all the coursework that he's done. He's, familiar with some of these topics and had, training on these topics. And then, honors program, presidential scholar, Dean's List, graduate in the top 5% of his class. If you graduate in the top 5% of your class, that's something that a manager is going to want to know, because it shows that you like to learn, you are good at learning, and kind of roll with the punches. an environment needs a change and they need somebody that's able to pick up a new programming language or pick up a new tool really quickly. That's something that we can use as a selling point in your advantage. And then he also had his AWS Cloud Practitioner certification listed too. Typically, certifications aren't something that are required for roles; they're considered nice to have. So you want to be able to, profile your nice to haves as well and market those for your profile. The next thing is a professional overview. This, I would say, take with a grain of salt. This is the one that he had on the top of his profile. I personally think it might be a little lengthy, but it's quick and to the point. I always like to say this is your sneak peek. You don't need to go super in depth of everything, just a quick overview. If this is the first thing that I see when I open your profile, has years of experience, has the fact that you are full stack, this candidate lean more back end focused. Quick overview without giving too much information. All that in the meat and potatoes of that information should be in the professional experience tab, but this is just a quick overview. Make sure that you are tailoring it to the job descriptions that you're applying for. So if one says, must be able to collaborate well with a group of engineers, or must be open to do paired programming or things like that, add that in. That shows that you read the job description. It makes you a better fit for the job description. And then whenever this is scanned through the ATS, and you see paired programming or collaborates well with developers or something similar to what the job description says, it's going to highlight that. It's going to also increase your grade for, the grade that you receive based on how closely aligned your resume is to the job description. And then technical skills. There's so many ways to do this. This is typically the way that I like to do it for full stack positions. If it is a specific backend role, or if it's a specific front end role, you don't necessarily have to do it like this. But this gives you a very good overview of your experience, front end and back end, your experience with CI/CD, your experience with cloud environments, the tools specifically that you've used with cloud environments. I like to say keep this, or this is where you can put the most amount of technologies, right? So if it is in the job description you see for front end, the only requirement is React, but kind of down a little bit more, it's listed HTML, it's listing CSS, it's listing Bootstrap, it's listing things like that. Putting them into technical skills is going to keep your resume short, just because you don't need as many words to be able to put it into play. And it's also going to increase your rating for ATS systems. And then this is the most important thing for a resume. As a recruiter, as a hiring manager, as a HR representative or a talent acquisition specialist, this is what we look at most heavily. So this is the resume. I took away company names and titles just to keep their identity safe. But the tech stack for the job description that they were hired for are also listed. So the tech stack of the job description, they needed 3 years of experience, front end with preferably React, but not required, back end, experience building out and maintaining APIs, preferably with Node.js. They were using GraphQL specifically. That was more of a nice to have, really. Any API experience, if it was REST, if it was JSON, or if it was SOAP, they were totally fine with it. What they were actually doing was taking REST APIs and wrapping them in a GraphQL wrapper. So being able to understand GraphQL is going to be super helpful. Other things, state management was something that was listed. SQL was something that was listed. And then AWS was listed. Whenever you are doing that, this is what I mean whenever I'm saying it's tracking an ATS system. It's highlighting things and it's giving you a rating or a grade of how much of a fit you are for the position. This is what recruiters and hiring managers need to see. So if you put in, your bullet point, it's built a single page web application, end to end. That is helpful within some reason. We know that you built out a single page application, but what tools did you use? What was the environment like that you were in? what was the team size? What was the application used for? Was it used internally? Was it used externally? Is it a software as a service that was built out? Those are some things that we really need to know before giving you a call, just to be able to understand if you are truly a fit for the opportunity. Um, so whatever your tech stack is across the entire board, I highly, highly, highly recommend putting in those keywords into your resume. And also make sure that you're tailoring them to the job description that you're applying for. So if you're hiring to a back-end position, make sure that these more back-end focused bullet points are listed probably before the front end ones, right? So the first thing that we want to see whenever we look at your experience, we want to see that back-end experience first. If you are applying to a back-end position, you're applying to a front-end position, we want to see those front-end positions first. If you're applying to a full stack role, I always like to recommend doing it in the same order that is listed in the job description. So in the job description, if it says full stack developer, but under their responsibilities or experience tab, it specifically says front end first, put that front end experience first. And then if the second bullet point is back end technology or a back end programming language, put that second and just go off of that, just so that it looks like it's tailored specifically towards the job description. Personal projects is something that I also recommend more for entry, junior, early, mid-level developers. So if you're newer to your career, or you took a career gap and you are getting back on the market, being able to show personal projects with GitHub links, I would like to specify, is going to be something that will help you in the long run. It's going to increase your rating score if it's the technologies that are also in the job description, but it also shows if it's not the same tech stack that you're interested in learning new technologies. You are, potentially a polyglot developer. You are able to, learn, pick up new technologies fast. In your GitHub, you may be, collaborating with a team. So I always like to list those and then make sure that you are specifically putting the GitHub links. I've actually seen in a lot of cases that individuals that put personal projects on here with GitHub links in their resume, they actually have had some hiring managers completely eliminate the at-home coding assessment or a whiteboarding exercise or something like that because they have code examples. So could make the interview process, easier for you as well. And gonna stop and answer some more questions here. Perfect. Looks like I think where I left off was, sorry, they keep moving. Let me just do it this way. Should I put a gap due to health issues on the resume? If you are comfortable doing so, I never share more than you are comfortable sharing, but also don't go in too much detail. I would say either just be when your gap was due to health concerns, something of that nature. I think that's totally fine too. Is a 1-year gap after graduation considered a career gap, taking into consideration the current job market? If so, this career gap should be mentioned in LinkedIn and on the resume. I would say not a career gap. I would say with that, you're obviously right out of college, it is harder to get a job, unfortunately. Taking into consideration what the current job market looks like and the amount of competition that there is in the market right now. So, and I think most people that understand the market do know that and are completely aware of that and totally fine with that. I would say in that case, make sure that you are staying up to date on skills. So do some of those courses so that whenever somebody asks you, how's the job search been? You're able to, it's not hasn't been the best. I've, had some interviews, unfortunately, didn't get those positions. But during this time, I have been staying up to date on my skills. I've taken a Coursera course on XYZ. I've, started a GitHub repository to be able to, or, started building out an application on my own time just to kind of keep my skills sharp. Things like that is something that I would say, but I would say that I would not consider that a career gap by any means. If you have an interview, would you ask the recruiter what she would ask before the interview? So I actually do interview prep calls with my candidates. It'll typically include me and the account executive, the individual that manages the direct partnership with the hiring manager. So as a recruiter, I am more of your advocate, the software engineer that I'm working with. So I know your story back and forth. I have your resume. I had that initial conversation with you, the screening call to determine if you're a good fit. The account executive typically has the direct hiring manager relationship. She knows, they know. Sorry, I was thinking one specific example. The ins and out. What are the red flags that a hiring manager sees? What is something that they love to see on a resume? What's something that they hate to see on a resume? They've met this hiring manager in person before, so are they going to be, are they more on the shy side? Are they totally, completely conversational? It's just a laid back conversation. I always like to have those. I would ask your recruiter that you're working with if that is something that they would be open to. Hey, is this a manager that you've been supporting a relationship for, a while? Any tips that you can give me? I always also send out a interview prep email template that I would say that has really some basic questions for you to ask. Something that I always reiterate to individuals that are going through the interview process is thank you notes are still in. I don't know that they will ever go out. I have had a candidate get a job over another candidate because he sent a follow-up email. So there are specific things like that. So use your recruiter's knowledge of the job market and the managers that they're working with or the companies that they're working with to your advantage if they are open to giving you any information. Sorry, going through and then some have been answered. So just trying to make sure I'm not missing any questions as well.
No worries at all, Brianna. We may not be able to get through all of the questions.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
want to make sure that we give you time to present everything that you were wanting to talk about.
Yep, absolutely. I'll just go through the rest of my presentation and then any specific questions that you guys have, my contact information will be at the end if you don't mind just following up via email. I'm happy to answer them there.
Perfect.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was 6:25 already.
Yeah, no worries at all.
Perfect. So portfolios, just an overview. This is going to be super quick. What do we look at when we look at a portfolio? What do we look at when we look at a GitHub profile? So this is the same candidate that I've been referring to this entire time. This is their GitHub profile. Screenshots, didn't want to, show his identity or anything like that. But the three things that recruiters look at most heavily when they're looking at a GitHub from first glance is going to be the amount of repositories that you have, the amount of stars that you have, but most importantly, overall is the amount of contributions that you have. Obviously, this individual has a ton of contributions. That is not necessarily the expectation, but your GitHub shows if it is up to date and active that you are, it shows really more of an interest outside of work. Those repositories that you're working with on a day-to-day in your job, typically you're not going to be public for the right reasons. So, being able to collaborate with other developers, if you're on, any platforms, it's like, hey, here's this GitHub. I really can't figure out. There's this one, there's this one thing in this code base that I cannot figure out, and it's pulling and it's failing the unit test. Can somebody come take a look at that? And you go in and figure it out. Shows that you're able to collaborate well with others. It shows that you're willing to help out when needed, things like that. And that is really from a recruiter's first glance. Like I can read a little bit of code, but I definitely cannot read enough to be able to go through your entire code base of a repository that you have and determine if it is correct or not, or what you should have done differently. So from a recruiter standpoint, those are the three main things that we look at. From a portfolio perspective, these are used more heavily, I would say, with those personal projects that you have. If you are doing freelancing on the side, you've got some open source gigs on the side that you're working on, being able to kind of explain what you've done for those projects will always be super helpful too. Pictures are also great. Hey, this is what it looked like before. When I changed everything, this is what it looked like afterwards. Oh, for me, like, oh, that looks great. And then there is information, underneath it with what they did, how they did it, the tools that they use, things like that. That's super helpful. Also, another way for us to be able to access your resume and access your contact information. These are 2 slides of positions. If anybody on here is actively considering a new opportunity right now, I went through my job board about 20 minutes before I hopped on this call just to make sure everything was updated. So here are some positions that I have available. There are some, that are remote, and some of them are hybrid or on site in specific areas. I know we've got diverse regions throughout here. So if anything looks interesting to you, just send me a follow-up email. Happy to schedule a time to call. These are more, junior to mid-level positions that I have available. And I'm just going to go to the next page that has some senior level positions available too. Like I said, just shoot me a follow-up email and we can schedule a time to chat. Happy to answer any questions and go over those opportunities with you guys. And then my last slide is just my contact information. If you guys want to take a quick picture or write down this information, connect with me on LinkedIn, send me over your resume via email. Happy to help. Any pointers, tips, or tricks that I can. And then if I did not get to your questions, please follow up via email. I'm happy to help there too. But that is
Thank
it.
you
Thank
so
you
much.
guys so much.
Thank you. We really have loved having you. This was such an awesome presentation. So much good information. I will definitely be thinking about this for a while. So for everybody who attended, we are recording this session. So we will work on getting this uploaded to our YouTube channel, and we will share the link on the meetup event so that you can watch it later whenever you need. So great. Thank you everyone so much for attending. It's been wonderful to have you, and we'll see you at the next event. Thank you again, Brianna.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.